So good day everyone, welcome back to our class. So last meeting I have given you the slides about journalizing, but prior to that we have already discussed about journalizing different transactions. So if you could recall, there were 14 transactions and I showed you how to solve these problems. So our emphasis for this week is on how to write these journal entries using our general journal. So here in accounting 1N, so there are actually 9 steps in the accounting process. So these are the 9 steps. So step 1 is journalizing, posting, trial balance, adjusting entries, worksheet, preparation of the financial statements, closing entries, post-closing trial balance, and the reversing entry. So what we would discuss first is how to journalize. So actually we have already discussed step 1 and step 2, but then again, as what I've said, we would emphasize on how to write these transactions in the general journal. So now let us discuss on what is the format of a journal entry. So you could go back to your slides that I have given you. So journalizing is the act of recording business transactions in the journal. So what you would do is simply prepare a journal entry, either that is simple or compound. So simple journal entry is where you have one debit and one credit, while compound journal entry, you have more than one debit or more than one credit, or both debits and credits have more than one entries. So in this example, we have 2 debits and 2 credits. You could also have a compound journal entry if you have 2 debits and 1 credit. You also have a compound journal entry if you have at least 2 credits and 1 debit. So either or either of the 3, you will still be considered as having a compound journal entry. So let's go to our problem that I have given you last meeting. So we have here Davao Laundry Services. So the problem that I given you last meeting, there was no chart of accounts. So if there is no chart of accounts, meaning it is the first time that you have started the business and you were assigned to make the chart of accounts, so what you would do is simply scan the problems. What are the possible account titles that you will use until the last transaction? So if you already master or you are already familiar with the account titles, you could simply make the chart of accounts. But in my case, I have already made the chart of accounts, which is this one. So this will be your chart of accounts. So cash in bank, accounts receivable. Then if you have if this is a full-blown accounting process, which includes closing entries and adjusting entries, I already included the estimated uncollectible accounts, laundry supplies inventory, laundry equipment, accumulated depreciation, notes payable, accounts payable, accrued advertising, S. Santos Capital, S. Santos Drawing, income and expense summary, laundry income, uncollectible accounts, depreciation expense, salaries expense, rent expense, utilities expense, taxes and licenses, advertising expense, and interest expense. So don't worry, because most of our problems, if you are to solve the full-blown accounting process or even the start of our activities in journalizing, most of the time I will give you the chart of accounts. So when you are about to start to solve the problem and there is already a chart of accounts, so if you could recall, chart of accounts is the summary of the account titles that you would use. So the next thing that you would do if you have seen the chart of accounts is to number them. So in my case, I wrote GL because that will be used in the folio of your journal. But you could simply write 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 until the last. So if we have already numbered our chart of accounts, so let us proceed with our journal. So if you have noticed in your journal, take a look at your journal. So if you could recall my policy, you are required to have your journal, ledger, 10-column worksheet, bond papers. So the bond papers are for you to be able to write your trial balance, financial statements, and if you are told not to use the journal, like last meeting, I did not yet introduce to you the general journal. So every time you'll make your entries without using this book, this general journal, you are to use the bond paper. So why is it bond paper and not the yellow paper? Because you have to take a picture of your answers. Be sure that when you would take the picture, you do not include the background. Just take a picture of the document. Be sure that it's clear. It's not blurry. Be sure that your handwriting is legible and clear. So please avoid using unnecessary colors. So I would allow you to use black ball pen. Please refrain from using blue ball pen because there are some pens that are not clear even if it's blue. So I would just allow you to use the black ones. And all the more, do not use pencil. So what is the format of a journal? So if you have noticed this part, it's blank. It's for the date. So if the problem is silent and it does not indicate any date, so please use the current year. So you could write here the word date and write the year on this part. And you'll write the word here as date. Or you could simply write the year here, 2020. If there is no indication of what month those transactions have transpired, simply use the current month. So if it's not stated in the problem that the problem is during March, so you could simply use September since it's September. Then what if there are no days or it's not marked as what day? So you could simply use, or you could just write numbers like if it's September, September 1, 2, 3, 4, just use the arrangement of the numbers. Anyway, so moving on. In this part is the particulars. So some would write account titles here, particulars or explanation. In our case, let's just use particulars. This is where you would type your debits and credits and explanation. So in accounting 1N, the third line is supposedly the explanation, but I would just accept if you will use the number sign for the third line. Just be sure that you have followed the format, the indentation, wherein all debits are written on this side. Then skip 5 spaces for your credit, then another 5 spaces from your credit. That is for your explanation. Folio. Folio is used as a reference, meaning after the journal, where can you find these transactions? Where will you post it? So this is now the time that you will use the numbering that you have written in your chart of accounts. So since if that is a journal, you will write it in your ledger. So that is why the account titles that we numbered, I wrote GL, but you could still use only the numbers in your chart of accounts. But in your general journal, the folios should have the letters GL, then the number of the account title. Then for the debit, as what I've said, there are only 2 money columns. It's for the debit and it's for the credit. So for the debit, which is on the left side, so you have to use properly the money columns. So the ruling in the money columns, number 1, do not use comma for you to separate thousands and millions. You will never see a comma. And you will not see a decimal point for you to separate the centavos. Another rule, you will not see a peso sign. Since these are money columns automatic, one would think that that is measured by the current currency of the country. So in our case, peso sign. So we are using pesos, but in the money columns, no peso sign. And lastly, for the centavos part, if there is no centavo in the amount, you may either use dash or 2 zeros. In my case, it would be easier for us if there are no centavos. It would be easier if I would use a dash. Why? It helps me from being confused with a lot of digits. So if it's your first time to see money columns, you need time to adjust yourselves with the small boxes. If you have noticed in your journal, so there are small boxes. So how to use the money columns aside from the 3 rules? So start from right to left. So on this part, a little bit bigger box, that is for your centavos. So if you have a centavo, it's either you will write the number 1 digit, but we would prefer, no, not either, but you are to write the 2 digit. You have to round it off. Only 2 decimals will be written. So that is, for example, 55, 40, 31. So you will write it that way. Next to the decimal, for your centavos, so you have to go back to your basic math for the place values. So the first small box from your right is for your ones place. Next is for your tens, hundreds, thousands, 10,000s, 100,000s, and millions. So for the smaller boxes, you are only allowed to write 1 digit. But for the last one, since that is the last one, you could write 2 digits or more. So if that's 10 million, you could write it that way. Since we don't have decimal, it may either be 2 zeros or dash. So that is 10 million. So how to use that? Ma'am, it's confusing. There are a lot of boxes rather. So you could start from right to left. So how many zeros are there in 10 million? So you have 7. So ones, tens, hundreds, thousands, 10,000, 100,000, then millions. So for example, the amount is 1,000. There's no decimal. So you could write dash. It's better than try to look at 10 million, diba? It's more confusing if you will use the 2 zeros. So 10 million is better if you will use dash. So for example, 1,000, how many zeros? There are 3. So 1, 2, 3, then number 1. Ma'am, what if I will start from left to right? 1,000. Oh, that's still correct, ma'am. No, because this is the millions place. And you could not also consider it as 1 million because there are no zeros here. Ma'am, I want to start here at the center because it's better. Oh, that's still not 1 million. Ma'am, I remember that there are 2 zeros for decimal. So I will start here. 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. Then I also remember that there is only one digit per box. So ma'am, this is still 1,000. This first two from the right are my zeros for the centavos. No, what number is that? That is 10,000. So you must be vigilant in using the money columns. So let's proceed to our problem solving. Let's go back to the first transaction. So here. So in March 1, 2020, so since that is the first transaction, write the month. So you could use the shortcut MAR, or if the month is just too short, you could simply spell it out. But if it's too long, like for example, December, November, October, you could write the abbreviation. So March 1. What happened in March 1? Oh, aside from that, you need to place also the page number here so that you will know the folio for your ledger. That one, the one. So let's go back to the problem. Mr. Severo Santos opens a current account with Allied Banking Corporation in the amount of 850,000 to start with his laundry shop business under the trade name Davao Laundry Services. So what happened in this transaction? So the owner invested, and his investment was written or was deposited in the bank. So what is the proper account title? Since that is on the bank, you will use cash in bank. But if you have used cash, that can still be considered, but the proper account title is cash in bank. So you will write cash in bank. So go to your chart of accounts. So that is the first one. That is GL1. So how much was being invested? That's 850,000. So there's no centavo. So write the digits. So that's 850,000. So since it is an investment by the owner, what should be the account? So every time the owner invests, that is his capital. So based on our chart of accounts, that is S. Santos Capital, GL10. So you must be consistent with your chart of accounts. If you have used Santos Capital, use that. But if in your in your chart of accounts you use S. Santos Capital, so again you must be consistent. So for the centavos, the ones, tens, hundreds, thousands. So 850, so that is 10,000, then 100,000. So do not forget the indentation. You could write number sign or simply the explanation. This is investment by owner. So in the book that we have been using, the author advised to have a separate line after each transaction. So to be uniform, let's just skip one line. So let's proceed here. Next transaction is March 2. So ma'am, do we need to have numbers here? No, not necessarily. So I'll show to you why I wrote numbers here later on. So purchase laundry supplies on account, that is 90,000 from the following suppliers. So we have SM City Davao, Gaisano Mall, and CCC Mall. Ma'am, do we have to separate these accounts? In the general journal, no need. You will have a separate journal and ledger for that. So we have subsidiary ledgers for each supplier and for each customer, you could have one book each or a few pages for each of them. It depends on the nature and size of your transaction. But in our case, so let's discuss first the basic general journal. So if we are writing this in the journal, we will just sum it up. Again, we'll just write the details on the subsidiary ledger for each supplier and for each customer. So next is purchase on account. Take note, this was, you already know that it's an account transaction. It's not a cash transaction. But what should be the proper account title? Should it be a payable or a receivable? So, kinsay nangutang. So, is it us who is having a credit transaction? Or is it the other party who is having a credit with us? So, take note, it's purchase. So, meaning it's us who is nangutang. Question is, was it verbally done or how do you call that? With a document. So in this case, it's not indicated that there was a document. So assume that it is verbally done. So if it's verbally done and it is us who is nangutang, therefore that is accounts payable. So what did we receive from them? Laundry supplies. So based on our chart of accounts, what is the proper account title? That is Laundry Supplies Inventory, GL4. So that is for the amount of 90,000. So if you have mastered already the money columns, you could start from left to right. But if you haven't yet, so you could start from right to left. So either way, you still get the correct answer provided you know the place values. So what's our credit? So we have already established that it is accounts payable. So look at the chart of accounts. Accounts payable is GL8. So that is 90,000. So purchased supplies on account. Next transaction, March 3. So purchase of laundry machine for cash. So it's a cash transaction. What did we purchase? A machine. So look at our chart of accounts. What is the proper account title? So that is not a supplies but an equipment. So that is laundry equipment GL5. So that is 150,000. So since that is a cash transaction, we paid for it, so we forgo cash. So again, you must be consistent. In your chart of accounts, we use cash in bank. So you must, wait, this is 90,000. Then this is 150,000. So the explanation should be purchased equipment. So you don't need to write how many sentences per explanation. You could have a phrase so long as it's understandable. Next, March 4, rendered laundry services on account from customers. So if we rendered services, automatic you have a service income. So that is our credit. But what did we receive? It was on account. Take note. Kinsay giutangan, is it us or kita ang nangutang? So we rendered services but we were not paid. So the customer did not pay us yet. So that's March 4. So that is our accounts receivable. So based on our chart of accounts, accounts receivable is GL2. So how much was it? That's 80,000. But what is our credit? What did we forgo? Our services. So the proper account title, every time we'll render service. No, it's not service income. Let's go back to our chart of accounts. Proper account title is, wait. So that is laundry income. So since we have chart of accounts, we must be consistent. So you must follow that. And what was the GL number? 13. Explanation, rendered services on account. Next transaction, March 10, paid taxes and licenses due to the government. So why is it a debit? Take note that having a business is not a right, but it's our privilege. So we are given the privilege by the government to open up our business. So that's why expense is a debit. Then we have to pay for it. So what is the proper account title? That is taxes and licenses, GL19. For how much? That's 4,000. So since we paid for our taxes and licenses, credit, cash in bank. Again, cash in bank is the first account title. And that is 4,000. So payment for the taxes. Next transaction, March 12. So, Mr. Santos withdrew 10,000 cash from the business for his personal use. So, that is a drawing account. Take note that drawing is a reduction from your capital. Hence, the account title is debited. Which account title? That is S. Santos Drawing. So, what is the folio? That is GL11. How much was withdrawn? It's 10,000. So since it was gibawi by the owner, we forgo of cash. So that's GL1. So 10,000. So you could simply have an explanation of withdrawal by owner. Next transaction is March 17. We borrowed money from Allied Banking Corporation, 100,000 by issuing a 15-day note. It was deposited to the account of Davao Laundry Services by way of a credit memorandum issued by the bank. So we borrowed money from the bank. So what did we receive from them? That is cash in bank, GL1. How much was being borrowed? It was 100,000. So the question is, what should be the credit amount? It did not say that there was a document issued. It was, so kita may on account. Take note, in the bank, you do not borrow money without any document being issued. So, and it is also stated that a 15-day note was issued. So, look at the, for a while, look at the chart of accounts. So, that is notes payable. So you could use bank loan payable or bank loans payable or loans payable. But in our case, we use notes payable. This is GL. What number was that? 7. So 100,000. So in this case, this is borrowed, acquired loan. Acquired loan from the bank. Next transaction. The bank issued a debit memo, 1,000 for interest and bank charges. So if you have noticed in the previous transaction, it mentioned about credit memo. So don't be confused with the bank because opposite na sila. So if you credited the balance of a depositor, in our point of view, it is an increase of our deposit. Why is it credit on their case? Because actually the relationship of that of a bank and the depositor is that of a lender. So tablatag nagpahulam og kwarta sa bank. So if they would credit, meaning nag-disburse sila on their side, but they recorded it as credit in our account, so in our point of view, nadugangan ang atong deposit. But if they would issue a debit memo, meaning there is a deduction from our account. In this case, it's interest. So since this is still March 17, and we have already the transaction in March 17, no need to write the date here. Because if what it means when you wouldn't write any date is that it has the same date in the previous transaction. So since we are paying for the interest, so that is interest expense, look at the chart of accounts, that's interest expense GL21. So how much was the interest? That was 1,000. Since we paid for it, so that is cash in bank, GL1, 1,000. Payment of interest of our loan. Next transaction. Received cash of 45,000 representing collection from the following customer's account. That is March 21. So, take note, we received cash. So, automatic, that is cash in bank. GL1. So, again, same procedure. You do not have to separate the account titles in your general journal because you could simply write it in your subsidiary ledgers. You could show the separation of each supplier or customer there. So what is our credit? Or received cash. So we need to lessen the balance of our customer. So how to lessen the balance of the customer? And what happened? This is in relation to March 4. Diba, we rendered services and the customer didn't pay us, so we debited accounts receivable. How to lessen or how to zero out this balance? So the normal balance is debit. Para magamay siya, you need to credit that one. GL2, 45. So is that full payment? No. Because in March 4, the balance was 80. So I will show to you what does it mean to have if you want to lessen the balance, you will go to the opposite of the normal balance. I'll show you the ledger, how it is done. So for example, accounts receivable. So let's delete this first. Wait. Okay, here. So going back to our journal, March 4. So March 4 ha, let's emphasize or let's focus on March 4. So March 4, we debited accounts receivable. So let's focus in March 4 and the account title March accounts receivable. So there was a debit here. So if that is a ledger, same procedure, write the headings here. All must have headings. So on this side is for the debit side. So the date, particulars, folio, and debit. While on the other side, this one, it's for the credit. So if you have noticed, it's similar with your journal, but it's naka-T. So this is the center, and this is the upper part of letter T. So that's why it is called a T account. So what you're doing is simply separating the debit side and the credit side. So in the ledger, you will only write in the particulars if that pertains to cash account. The other account titles, no need to write anything here. So do not write the account titles, that it's already here in the heading. This is the purpose of the classifying portion of the definition of accounting. So going back to March 4, so we have used one page of the journal yet. So if you have noticed, so we're still in the first page. So the folio will be based here, the page number. If you have used another page, so that will be the second page in the folio here. So in the folio, the letters of your ledger would be JE. Since we used the first page, that is JE1. So what was the amount? That was 80,000. So in March 21, we received cash because they paid us for 45,000. If you will write it here, what would happen is that you'll simply add, if you could recall the footing, we have already discussed the ledger without the money columns. So you will do the footing. What would happen is that the final balance of your accounts receivable would be 125, which is not the case. Why? If you understand the normal balances, even by mere looking at the ledger, you would know that there is something wrong. Because for example, it is the end of the month. I want to know how much is my collectible. I will simply look at my accounts receivable. So by looking at this balance, you would know, I will still have to collect 125,000. The question is, are you sure the balance of the customers is 125? No, go back to your transaction. Why? Because what happened is that at first you rendered services, but what happened is they partially paid for the services we have rendered. Diba? Nibayad sila partial in the date of March 21? No. So how much was being paid? Go back to your journal. March 21, that's GL1, 45,000. So, if you have noticed, that is why we credited accounts receivable, because our purpose here is to minimize the balance. So, in our ledger, this is March 21. Again, no need to write in the particulars. We are still in the first page of our journal. We will write here the partial payment. That was 45,000. This is now the time, if there are no other transactions pertaining to receivable, if you will get the footing or the account balance, so this will be 35,000. Again, in getting the account balance, you will subtract debit and credit sides. Whichever is the higher amount, you will write your answer there. So since debit is higher, you'll write 35,000. So by simply looking at your ledger, so you saw 35,000. What does it mean? It means that you still have to collect 35,000 from your customers. So actually, accounting is not a math subject. What are we doing? We're simply writing the amounts given in the problem. Then plus total here, then subtract. Oh, that's why we have to use only basic calculator. So it's not a math subject, but you have to analyze. What does it mean every time you see this ledger? So you must be able to interpret. If someone, a friend who is not a business student would ask you, what does this mean? You are given a T account. What account title is that? Accounts receivable. I have a debit balance of 35,000. What does it mean? You will simply say, you still have to collect 35,000. Why? Show me the other transactions. So here, I have at first, pag March 4, I have a debit of 80,000. Then there is here on the credit side, 45,000 pag March 21. Then it becomes 35. What happened? So you would simply say, on March 4, it could be that you have rendered services, then they did not pay you. The amount was 80,000. Then by March 21, some of your customers paid you 45,000. That is why you have to collect the remaining balance of 35,000. So you must understand the meaning of the debits and credits, the normal balances. You must understand what is the meaning of that account title. Again, I said you must understand. I did not say you must memorize. So that is the implication of the normal balances. So if you want to add or you want to have a positive balance, you want to open an account for that account title, so follow the normal balance. In this case, accounts receivable. I'm opening an account which is the accounts receivable because someone did not pay me and I rendered him or her services. So I have a positive balance of 80,000. But here comes at near end of the month. He paid me. So the normal balance of accounts receivable is debit. So for me to lessen that balance, I will just credit it. So this is the remaining balance. So it's more on the analysis part. So this one is partial collection from customers. Next transaction. March 25, partial payment of accounts. So this is similar with March 21. But in March 21, it pertains to receivable. In March 25, it pertains to payable. So this is in relation to your transaction 2. You purchase supplies, but you promised to pay 90,000. It was verbally done. Then here comes March 25. You paid worth 60,000. So partial payment. So since normal balance of accounts payable is credit, for you to lessen that balance, you have to debit accounts payable. That is GL. Accounts payable is GL8. $60,000. So since you paid, you forgo cash. So that is cash in bank, GL1, 60,000. So how much is your remaining balance? Pag March 2, you have 90,000. Then you paid 60,000. So you have a balance of 30,000. So let's try to look at your ledger. So what I'm doing is, you are already having another background of your ledger. So I have already discussed ledger last week, but without the money column. So in this case, we have already discussed also the money columns. So for your assignment, you post your answers in this activity. Practice posting because there's a tendency that you will be confused. So here, March 2, you have a balance of 90,000, but in March 25, you paid 60. So the remaining balance as of this date is 30,000. So this is partial payment of our account. Next transaction. March 30. Mr. Severo Santos hired an accountant or manager for his business as he has plenty of things to attain to at 10,000 per month effective April 1, 2020. Go back to the definition of accounting. The first ing is recording. So what is part of recording? If you could recall, we have identifying, analyzing, and measuring. So let's identify. Is this a business transaction? Yes. Analyze. What is our debit? What is our credit? Naa ba? Not yet. Why? March 30 pa ni. You hired him and you did not receive anything yet, kay? Effectivity is April 1, 2020. Measuring. Yes, 10,000. But then again, this is not yet a financial information because it has not yet started. So, if it's not a financial information, based on the definition of accounting, this will not be recorded in our books of accounts. So, some would say they would write 30, no entry. But in reality, you don't need to write this. So, why did I present this as part of the problem? For you to know that not all transactions have entries. So, next. The following expenses were paid by Davao Laundry Services for the month of March 2020. So, we have here the, what do you call that? The enumeration of the expenses. We have space rental, telephone, light, and water, salaries of employees, which are contractual employees, then the total expenses paid. So if this is how the expenses are being presented, what you would do is make a compound journal entry, meaning you will record this in one entry, even though it has 3 kinds of expenses. But you will not simply copy this, space rental, telephone, light, and water, salaries of employees. But you will have to use the proper account title. So based on the book that I have given you, how do you record rental? So it's either rental expense or rent expense. So let's try to look at our chart of accounts. What did we have in the chart of accounts? It's rent expense, GL17. For the amount of 5,000. Again, this is the benefit we received for using the space. Next is light and water, that is utilities expense, that is GL18. $12,000. Lastly, the salaries. So that was salaries expense. What was the GL number? 16. For the amount of 10,000. Then since these are expenses paid, so we forgo of cash, specifically cash in bank. This is GL1. Then you total this, 5, 12, and 10. That should be 27,000. So please do not automatically copy the amount presented in the problem because sometimes there may be errors. So actually that's part of auditing. So the purpose of debit and credit, that's double entry system. So your debit must be equal to your credit. So dili pwede nga this is 27,000 then you will write here 20,000. There's something wrong. And also in the journal, so since this is the last transaction, you don't have to get the total here. No. This is the general journal. This is not the trial balance. This is not a ledger wherein you have to get the final balance for each account. So you'll simply stop there, and that is the end of the activity that I have given you regarding journal entry. So next step here is the ledger. So I've already discussed how to do the ledger. So I want you to practice doing the ledger. Post it in your ledger book. So you don't need to have one page each for the account title. You just have to estimate. So this is just a very short transaction or problem. So if you have noticed, I numbered how many transactions we have. That is 11. And for you to know how to check this is how we would check this. If you have a correct account title and correct amount with the correct placement, that's one check. So if your account title is correct but wrong amount, that is wrong. Correct amount, wrong account title, that is wrong. Aside from that, for the folio, if you have the correct account title and correct folio, that's correct. Wrong account title, correct folio, the folio is wrong. Ma'am, why? It's correct folio, even though the account title is wrong. Because you will only write the folio based on your account title. Diba? We wrote first the account title, then we look at the chart of accounts for the folio. So, it will not happen that account title is wrong but folio is correct. When would that happen? It simply means you're cheating. So, dali ra kaayo iila ang cheating class in accounting. Another, if this is correct but the folio is wrong, folio is still wrong. Because we need to have one check for the folio, then one check for this and this. So, meaning for this line, we have 2 points. Then here, same procedure. If this is correct and this is correct, that's one check. If this is correct and this is correct, folio is correct. If this is wrong but folio is correct, folio is wrong. So basically, in each transaction with one debit and one credit, you have 4 points. So we have 11 transactions, but the 11th transaction has 4 lines. So this is 2 checks for the folio and your entry, another 2, another 2, another 2. So that is 8 points. So this is just a very short problem. Take note. So we have 10 transactions. So transaction 1 until 10, we only have simple or single journal entry. Meaning there's one debit, one credit. And for each date, you have how many points? 4. So meaning 4 points for the simple journal entry times there are 10 transactions with simple journal entry. So 4 times 10, that's 40. Transaction 11 has 8 points, so you have already 48 points. Imagine, this is just a short transaction, short problem, and we are yet in the journal entries. We are yet to answer the ledger, then trial balance, adjusting entries, adjusted trial balance, worksheet, financial statements, closing entries, post-closing trial balance, and reversing entries that could reach minimum siguro mga 200 plus to 300. So imagine how many points. So you could not get a perfect score in ledger or a high score in ledger if you have something wrong with your journal. That's why I told you to master and familiarize yourselves with the 14 basic transactions. Tuyok-tuyokon na siya, little tweaks, or i-combine. But do not memorize per transaction because a little change in the problem, there is already something to change in your entries. So that is for the activity that I have presented to you in our previous slide. So again, master the 14 transactions. Understand the debits and credits, the normal balance. If you understand that, you will never go wrong in accounting 1. So thank you for listening. Hopefully, you have the correct answer. So when you would make the ledger, please follow the answers that I have shown you so that when you would make the ledger, you are already assured that what you are looking at for the journal is already having the correct answer, meaning your bases are already correct. So if you have mistakes in what you have submitted to me, so try to remember those mistakes, look at my correct answers, then try to solve the problem again without looking at the correct answers. so that you'll be able to practice analyzing. Accounting class is just more on analyzing and practice. You really need to practice solving problems in a fast manner. Time yourself. Why? When you would solve the full-blown accounting process, you have to solve it. Katong 9 steps, you have to solve it in 3 hours. And our official exam will be real time, so be sure that you have a signal on that time. So that is the policy of the school. Official exams are real time. So thank you and have a good day.